right about now to Antarctic Peninsula. And Moxie, like you mentioned, this is my first time watching this match on broadcast. I mean, is there anything that you think we should look forward to leading into this map? I mean, obviously we've seen it on broadcast already, but anything that you can maybe hype me up about this map for?
I mean, look forward to a lot of Bastion. If we're going by past performances, this does tend to be the map where Bastion finds the most amount of playtime to be able to just shred through the Reinhardt shields, take advantage of how enclosed up some of these spaces are. We're not seeing Twisted Mind starting off. Well, actually, we are seeing Twisted Mind starting off with LBBD. So they are going to be potentially running either the Echo or the Farah. This is definitely one of the maps that you can get away with it, as opposed to somewhere like Sub-Level, which obviously does have that skybox being cut off by the fact that the ceiling exists.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if that actually works out in their favor. And, you know, we've seen yesterday with, like, Yazan swapping over to the Echo at times even, where he would just play the Echo on, you know, New Queen Street. And, I mean, you mentioned yesterday, too, is that the moment that he swapped to Farah, you know, they started doing better, even though they ran that Echo earlier. Do you think LBB actually locks the Sojourn? You know, it's a little bit off meta for him, right?
I mean, I would expect that they're actually going to run out with it, given the fact that Slay is on the Kiriko and Nutella, who typically goes for the Mercy Pocket, is on that Lucio. They are running this Ramatra into the Reinhardt composition. Ramatra does do pretty deeply against the Reinhardt, given that the pummel does go through the Rein shield, and already you can see it's having an impact on how EXO are having to position behind that Reinhardt shield so that the pummel doesn't connect onto a majority of those players, just using those angles, cutting out the line of sight so that the Ramatra doesn't get to take advantage of the no drop-off from the ranged attack.
And Yubi just spamming around this backside, has to deal with this cast, but the cast doesn't have a lot of, you know, CC like he used to, but Slay kind of caught off position there by WMABON on the top side, and then Cookie drops down on the KSA to take out that Ramatra, and now they did take, Twisted Minds did take the point first, however, it's going to swap back into Oblivione's favor.
Yeah, only 6% of the point going to be picked up for Twisted Minds. They lose Yubi as well a little bit late to the mix, so another 30 seconds added on. Level 1 Crook, by the way, 81%. To that amp matrix, and the thing for Twisted Minds is that they don't really have anything to be able to counter it because they're not running the Mei. They're not going to be able to wall it off early. You can't really try and shield it with the Ramatra because it's just going to be gone in a matter of moments. When it does come through, you have to get the team to engage. And already you can see EXO looking for an engagement of their own, punishing the fact that Twisted Minds, again, not running that Mei, have no counter wall opportunity. So when EXO start to move forward, they have to move backwards. Level 1 Crook is able to find the lamp, and the pulse bomb, all of that space that Twisted Minds were looking to pick up is denied, but LBBD has already been able to find its way into the backline on that Sojourn and absolutely shreds into every single squish.
Wait, they're committing both the beat drop and the Mei ultimate as well from Oblivione. They do give up the point temporarily, but what a great turnaround from them, even though they were down members to commit ultimates there, Mox. I mean, that's just a great play from them. However, leading into this next fight, you know, Nutella will have that beat drop advantage very soon over Oblivione.
Nutella will have that beat drop advantage, but so too will a lot of other members of Twisted Minds have ultimates. And now it becomes a question of, is your disengagement going to be good coming through from EXO? They're already lengthening that fight distance, making it even harder for Twisted Minds to feel comfortable to drop the Annihilation. Given the nerf that it received, Nutella going down as well means you can't actually really put it to good use, especially if the shadow from Doge connects onto the ram and allows everyone from EXO to disengage before dealing with the tank themselves.
I just don't know how Doge was just alive there, just charging into the back line, everybody else fighting towards the point for EXO, and now they push forward onto the spawn doors of Twisted Minds. LBB does have that overclock to potentially catch somebody out of position, but with Cookie on this Cassidy Moxie, I mean, he's just hitting shot after shot with the high noon on the re-engage. 5% left. I'm not sure how Twisted Minds does this successfully.
Yeah, it is going to have to be a high noon coming out from EXO, not really using it. They're waiting for the overclock to come through to zone LBBD's ultimate out even further. Overtime bar has activated, so someone's going to have to contest Soundbar and Nutella to allow Twisted Minds the help to be able to sustain through the Cassidy ultimate. And no one's gone down. This is going to start to swing in the favor of Twisted Minds, but only temporarily until LBBD can manage to take advantage of that high ground and start to land those rail shots.
I love how Doge is playing this. Fire Strike on Nutella as well secures the point nobody could even touch. And Doge has been playing amazing against this Ramattra. It's kind of what you have to do on Reinhardt, where you just kind of progress onto this back line, whereas the Ramattra is trying to create some space. However, it's not really as prevalent as this Ryan, because you saw Moxie, LBBD was trying to find shots onto this back line, but Doge constantly in his face to make sure that Sojourn was not doing anything. And then meanwhile, right, that's like the majority of your damage on the side of Twisted Minds. So what do you do with this Reinhardt in your face like that?
I mean, not just the majority of your damage, but also space creation. Entirely denied. KSA wants to try and move on to Doge, but because you're not, you don't have a counter Mei to make sure that you survive potentially being isolated from the rest of your team, especially because you're not running that BAP. So no lamp to throw down if your tank gets isolated away from you. You can't put yourself into a frontline brawl where you can use those pummels to good use. So as a result, we only saw one annihilation being built up from Twisted Minds for the entirety of the round. That had the knock-on impact. There's the Mabel once again isolating the tank, and you can already see Nemesis bomb comes through from KSA, even a Suzu, but he still goes down, and because Slay had to go deep to try and save his tank, he goes down alongside it. Twisted Minds find the first kill, but they don't find the most impactful, and EXO walk away with first point control.
Yeah, this is, for some reason, this seems to be the problem with Ramattra, right? The Reinhardt seems to just be actually, you know, a bit more of a tank, whereas this Ramattra just goes in and seemingly just dies. Even after Twisted Minds finds that first pick, you still got Doge in the fight. You still have a lot of that backline of Oblivione, allowing them to win the 4 versus 5. KSA is trying to get aggressive, uses that form. Immediately, both he's already low HP. 50, 50, 30, 20. Now he's dead already to Doge on that front line. So Oblivione, they have a lot of that front line pressure, but this Ramattra just does not seem to be doing much for Twisted Minds.
Yeah, worse for Twisted Minds is eating into their resources. You saw, right? Nemesis bomb came through alongside that block to try and keep KSA alive, but it's followed up by Suzu. And because EXO know that Suzu has been removed, they can immediately take advantage of the fact that it's on cooldown and just chunk the damage in. And without that Ramattra, Twisted Minds just don't have the tank to be able to push them through the choke that is Engine Room. And we rinse and repeat. EXO still keeps control of this choke. They've got an Ant Matrix to back it up now. UV goes on to that backline, just trying to pressure out the point and force them to turn away from the choke. But the Ant Matrix is there, and EXO's hold is strong because of it.
Yeah, and the defense is seemingly so favored, too, because the great position, which is that little high ground spot, is easily rotatable, but there you go. UV already defined W Mamo, and that's the opening pick with this overclock. They could potentially push forward, and KSA does find Doge, slams onto Crispy as well as they flip the point at 68%. So finally, Twisted Minds have a foothold here.
Yeah, finally they have a foothold, but it really is going to be the true test this next fight. Because it's not an Ant Matrix that they have to worry about. That you can disengage, you can wait it out to be gone and then move in with something like an Overclock. No, now you have to worry about a Shatter. And when you're running Ramattra, it's the same as Winston, right? You use that shield, you use that bubble very early on, and the Rhine knows that he has such a big window to be able to land that hammer down. And already, Twisted Minds have used the shield, and EXO just rotate around the back. If Twisted Minds walk into them, they walk into the Deadeye, they walk into the Shatter.
And then May wall onto KSA into that high noon. Actually doesn't land on a KSA. Still alive. Actually, at the same time, Nutella is falls to Doge. Same with Crispy taking out KSA. So they rotate onto that point. Now the stagger comes out from Twisted Minds. Even with that Kitsune rush, it wasn't enough to stop against that May ultimate from W Mamo. And that's why, you know, we've seen so much May, right, Moxie?
And look what EXO have done by winning that fight, by being able to take KSA down, the isolation, the blizzard, and the shatter being put in to make sure that the tank is down. EXO have bought Crispy the time to build up sound barrier. So Twisted Minds, they do have the annihilation, they do have Nutella on this Lucio to try and bolster KSA's health to allow him to go aggressive with it. But EXO with the sound barrier have the ability to do the same for it.
Doge gets the charge onto Yubi, though, somehow onto a Tracer into the backline. KSA is going, trying to find some value out of his ultimate, but he's just focused down. Suzu's force, now that Baptiste ultimate is here, and has a great angle. However, KSA is still nice and healthy on the point. Now, never mind, finally falls to level 1 Crook. Crispy takes out Slay, and that was a pretty solid first map for Oblivione, because now they're going up 1-0 over Twisted Minds.
Yeah, I think EXO really showed just the cracks in that Ramattra composition. Right? A lot of the time when we talk to players, when we talk to coaches, there's a discussion of like, oh, meta's up in the air, nothing's really decided. But one thing that tends to ring true from everyone that we talk to is that Ramattra is not really the tank that you want to be running. And we saw the exact specific reason. Ramattra, even though on paper he can be pretty beefy with that Nemesis Storm and the ability to be able to block a majority of that damage, is still extremely vulnerable and forces out so many of those really important resources, specifically things like the Amsky from the Lucio and the Suzu from the Kiriko. And a lot of the time, because KSA was going aggressively in, Play had to aggressively commit in. And if he didn't, well, you see it there on the screen. KSA goes in too deep, the Kiriko can't commit in afterwards, the Blizzard comes out, the Shatter to confirm the kill, and immediately that push just falls apart for Twisted Minds because they don't have a tank to be able to anchor their composition around them.
No, and well, somebody I also want to point out, Moxie, on Oblivione's side is level 1 Crook, really has been a standout support player in the matchup so far. I mean, obviously great lamps, great positioning, and great heals and damage output. And overall, I mean, he has a lot of flexibility in his hero pool too to play over to some of those main support roles or heroes if necessary. And he really is the embodiment of the modern day support player, where you kind of have to have, a super large hero pool, right? People don't really want support players that are just limited to only 1 or 2 characters, right? You can't just be a Zen one trick anymore. You got to have at least 3, 4, 5 heroes deep in order to actually be a viable player. And level 1 Crook actually playing very, very well for Oblivione, despite obviously their composition kind of just rolling over Twisted Minds. I would say that's another point in favor of that May Reinhardt rush, right, Max?
And I mean, another person that we really have to point out is Doge. Because we could see, right, the Tracer Yubi was trying to move forward and create a lot of space, especially on Icebreaker. This is something that I was talking to you about, with how wide that map can be, with how large it is, and all of the sort of corridors and hallways that the Tracer can flank through, especially with the amount of health packs that are available on that map. If you have to turn around and deal with a Tracer trying to just bully your backline, you do leave that choke a lot more open, and that Ramatra would have had a lot more room to be able to work through. But the fact that Doge was just able to very quickly turn around, get the charges to connect onto the Tracer, and immediately go back into that frontline brawl of trying to tank diff, meant that the team just had a lot more space to be able to work with because their backline was so safe. And that meant that things like the Immortality Field and the Lucio Amp was able to be saved to go aggressive rather than have to use it defensively in emergency situations where it might not have landed in time.
Yeah, I better not see my Rhines trying to charge Tracers. That's a very hard thing to do. It's like hitting a freaking fly with your pinky finger or something. I don't know. It's super hard to do. But King's Row is going to be our next map, guys. Leading into this next map, Moxie, who do you think is favored here, considering we just saw a pretty solid map from Oblivione with that Rhine comp? Another Rhine-favored map, I would say, on King's Row.
Yeah, and you hit the nail right on the head, right? I have to go with EXO because they're the team that we've seen run that Rhine rush most effectively, because in this matchup, they're the only team that has run that Rhine rush yet.
Yeah.
I am expecting that EXO are most likely going to try and mirror the Rhine rush moving into King's Row, because like you pointed out, this is one of those maps where we do see that composition being most traditionally run. Sometimes we see the Cassidy, sometimes we see the Sojourn, sometimes the Bastion. Where try and go for those flank angles. The Bastion a little bit more has to anchor towards that Reinhardt, but the Cassidy and the Sojourn going for that split focus, making point A a little bit easier for the attacking team to be able to break through is definitely something to watch out for as well. And that means my eyes are going to be on Cookie, because Cookie has been hitting those shots today.
Yeah, and this is something that we can't ever, knock Cookie down for, is his aim and his precise mouse placement. I mean, he's just one of the best aimers that we have in all of Overwatch. Everybody always says it about him. It's like even teams that really don't like Cookie or don't like what he does, obviously, because, he's a very good player, sometimes they'll say that he's maybe out of position or something. But at the same time, with Cookie, nobody's ever said he's a bad aimer. Like, I feel like he's always, people said, like, top 3, even number 1 in terms of just raw aim talent in the entire game. And that was that next level that Cookie's kind of had to step into, right? Is that, upper tier, upper echelon of positioning and overall placement. And he really wasn't dying out of position at all on Cassidy. He was doing his job, playing with the team, making sure that he actually took down the right targets at the right time. And this is kind of, like we mentioned, the next elevation he has to take to actually reach the upper echelon of DPSs in all of Overwatch.
Yeah, especially because we don't know where Shockwave and Psycho have ended up, whether or not they are going to stay in the contender sphere or whether or not they are going to be moving back up into Overwatch League. That was the thing about old EXO, right? All 5 of their players were literally the best players in those specific roles. Now it's a little bit more up in the air, so that crown of being number 1 in your role is entirely up for grabs. So for a lot of these players, not only is Pro-Am about cementing your position in Tier 2, it's about pushing your name out there as a challenge, a gauntlet for other players in your role to say, no, I'm the better aimer, I'm the top dog in this spot.
That's a good point to bring up, Moxie, because I feel like in the history of Overwatch, right, it's very easy to say as the best team, oh, we have the best player in every role, but realistically, you don't know. Right? Like, how do you know unless you have a team as dominant as Oblivione was for so many years? But at the same time, you know, like, what's the difference between, you know, a Jonak level and talent, and then also maybe like like an elite level role player, right? Say you have all of the talent in the world like Jonak, but you kind of need that star player role. You kind of need to have that support. Whereas if you're just an elite level role player, say like a basketball term, a Draymond Green or something of this team, maybe you need like a glue guy, right? You kind of need those guys that just play your role, play in that team, and you know, players like Crispy, players like WMMO, and really support the likes of Cookie, Doge, and, you know, level 1 Crook.
You know, your sports analogies, they just go straight over my pretty much like whenever I'm on the court in the basketball, it just goes straight over my head. I'm too short, I'm not even going to be able to catch it. But what I can catch are these amazing games that we get the absolute joy of being able to cover, Dustin. And we can see right from the get-go, see what a brilliant throw. Better than any I can make on a basketball court too. But Twisted Minds being a little bit...
Any European, every European's day today, Moxie. I'm gonna say one word that's gonna ruin your day. Soccer.
Oh no.
There you go. Every European triggered right now.
Yeah, pretty much. But I'll tell you what, this is interesting. Twisted Minds, on the defense, by the way, they're not on the attack. They're not swapping this composition up. They're sticking with the Junker Queen.
Yeah, they don't. I like how you mentioned that they wanted to swap towards that Reinmir, but at the same time, you know, KSA not really in his hero pool to play that Reinhardt, so they're just trying to figure out everything besides Rein that they could play. But KSA already taken down a Cookie with that Baptiste lamp. Slay unfortunately not able to get his, and unfortunately for Twisted Minds, they're just falling apart at the seams.
Yeah, so Twisted Minds, by trying to run this Junker Queen, they're wanting to do the same thing that they did with the Ramatra, right? Push aggressively forward. The Junker Queen, obviously, with the fact that you can heal off of the wounds and things like your Carnage, does have a little bit more self-sustain, but at the same time, it's not a shield. And EXO literally just rally behind Doge's shield. Cookie again provides that little bit of extra support on the flank angle and absolutely pummels Twisted Minds, knowing that they're going to burn out the Immortality field far faster from the other side because they don't have to shield burn through to be able to force that Baptiste into parting with that cooldown. And that was a very quick point A. More importantly, all of that damage, all of that aggression that EXO were able to put in has allowed level 1 Crypt to deep slay to the Amp Matrix, and it means that Twisted Minds can't rally around this initial approach to be able to keep control of B.
Oh, what a great Mei wall as well to wall off the players in the library from WMMO and to zone them off immediately into a charge from Doge. That's another easy team wipe for Oblivione.
This is literally just teamfight after teamfight being won by a Reinhardt. Doge knows that KSA doesn't have anything to actually be able to counter that charge, right? You're not running a Reinhardt, so you can't charge into Doges to knock both of the Reins down. You're not running Arista, so you can't fortify out of it. You will literally have no choice but to take that charge because Slay isn't there on the Kiriko either. You can't Suzu it. All you can do is hope that you're going to be able to make sure that you actually allow that Junker King to survive the pin. And it means that they're having to use Deadeye just to try and push back into that fight, but it's straight into a Blizzard from Maymone, and it's just cleanup.
Yeah, they're just all gone now. Cookie to follow up on a Slay, and having Doge in this lobby on the Reinhardt, it's just like having 1.5, you know, members. You have an extra 5.5 versus 5. Feels like just because of that armor, because of all that tankiness that he provides, plus the shield. I mean, we don't have to keep rambling on about how Twisted Minds are, you know, in a bit of a deficit composition-wise, but they're also in a deficit ultimate-wise, too.
Yeah, this could actually be one of the fastest King Throw takes we've ever seen.
The Shadow?
They have almost 5 minutes. The Shadow comes through from Doge, and it's free. It's absolutely free. Doge can pull these shenanigans because he knows there is no punishment on the other side. There is no way that you can block the Shatter, and Doge now can just wait up close by their spawn, know that he's going to be able to connect the pin onto one of them as they come out, and force them to wait 30 seconds longer to be able to contest the payload.
This is brutal, Moxie. The Mei ultimate comes out from Twisted Minds to try to zone here, but Doge with that beat drop still stays alive. There's that Carnage. It does land on everybody. That's the one impactful thing you can do on that on that Junker Queen, but Yubi finally finds the 2 kills on a Crispy and the Doge, and Oblivione have to back up after a very aggressive play, which was shades of old XO, to be honest.
Yeah. EXO very much, they may have changed their players, but they have not changed that dominance. They are looking extremely strong at the moment as we're seeing the swaps come through from Twisted Minds, LBD going on to that Farah, Nutella going onto the Mercy, the Pocket, but out comes the Amp Matrix, and they have no choice but to walk straight into the damage through it, or let that payload just hit the finish line and finish King's Road push for EXO. Level 1 Crook entirely untouched at the moment, just gets to hold that angle and spam sustain onto the Reinhardt composition, holding up on that front line, and there are no members remaining from Twisted Minds to stop that payload any longer. 4 minutes, 4 seconds. Push through King's Road.
The gain time, Mox. You think about that. what a great run. Yeah, I think it's in Twisted Minds. Yeah, I'm not really sure like what they're talking about behind the scenes, but you know, it surely can't be positive after a couple of lost team fights in a row. Maybe Twisted Minds, aren't exactly fully understanding what they can do here, because I mean, you got KSA, right? You're a little bit limited hero pool wise. He has every off tank in the market covered basically, except Reinhardt, right? Like obviously Reinhardt's not an off tank, but I mean now in Overwatch 2 you only have main tanks. So because of that, right, KSA's hero pool is a bit limited. He's still trying to figure out what he wants to play, right? D.Va can match the armor that Reinhardt has, but what are you going to do when you're out of that defensive matrix, when you don't have that shield, when you don't have that CC that is the Earth Shatter?
Yeah, and I mean, you called it right. KSA was dominant when we had Junker Queen being in the meta, was dominant when we had Roadhog being in the meta, but even when old EXO wanted to play that Winston, it was Krondop who would play the Winston, not KSA. So you really can see, as you pointed out, that punishment. Oh my goodness, Doge.
No.
Again, like he knows. He's literally just playing with his food at the moment because he knows that there is nothing that they can really do to stop this pin from coming through.
I don't even think you're fully quiet when you crouch as Reinhardt above here in the hotel, but he's caught out by Yubi, has to back off into his team. Almost can't get caught out here because Slay is on the Ana, but Doge backs out of there, has that hard pocket from level 1 Crook, who has been playing phenomenal like we said. But this change up, maybe this is what Twisted Minds need with this spam composition versus EXO's defense.
It's not the spam comp, it's the fact that they're going to have verticality over this Reinhardt, but Lamp is there, and as a result, Cookie gets to continue to hold this angle. Play on the Ana is putting a little bit more pressure. Doesn't matter what the shield into Doge! The Anti-Nade connects, but yep, there's a Reinhardt in your back line, and that's a very dead Ana because of it. The Mercy can't even really try and go for that resurrection because of the nerf 2 Guardian Angel. You're leaving yourself far too vulnerable, and as a result, what should have been brilliant setup for Twisted Minds has very quickly turned in EXO's favor.
I like the camera operators didn't get it. Twisted Minds didn't understand it. Somehow Doge is in your back on and your Ana. Slay is pissed. I would be peeved. I would be so peeved. Slay is gonna play so scared now because that Ryan could be anywhere at any time at all.
You don't even think as well that he's going to be able to creep up on you, but that Reinhardt can be surprisingly stealthy when he does actually. Speaking of surprisingly stealthy, hello! From the top ropes, it's Doge coming forward! We're in a wrestling match, Dustin. Someone's about to grab a metal chair and smack it over an Ethernet.
Where is Doge at all times? Somehow, or we have like the most wide camera lens you could possibly have, and somehow Doge sneaks upon you like a chameleon in a metal armor. I'm just like, I'm surprised with every time Doge just does this. You make sure you're paying attention to him. Like I swear, he's just somewhere on a different plane.
We need a GPS tracker. We need a GPS tracker on this Reinhardt at all possible times. He goes for another pin! He doesn't manage to find a kill off of the back of it though, and without a shield, the barrage does come through. But Doge is still able to find a fire strike kill onto Slay.
Okay, but LBVD finally moves on here. It's all into LBVD. There we go, finally, to capitalize off of the aggressive, crazy playstyle that is Doge charging in. I swear to God, are we watching LH Cloudy or are we watching Doge right now? Like, who's playing the game? 1 minute and 34 seconds now. Finally, Twisted Minds are going to capture first point, King's Row.
This is the bumper school of Reinhardt. this is what's happening right now, and it's working because, again, like, in that frontline brawl, Twisted Minds don't really have anything against it. The only thing that they have going against this Reinhardt composition is controlling that verticality, right? With that Pharah being able to get above that Reinhardt shield. But already you can see the hack come through onto Nutella. The Sombra just being in the mix makes it so much harder for that Pharah to be able to operate. Even worse, if you get hacked out, Cookie is just going to be there to be able to pick up onto that Pharah and punish the fact that the Mercy can't really find the healing with her passive now removed.
Well, how do they break through this choke? Yeah, you're against the Shatter. KSA is going to have that Diva Bomb for the backline now after he loses mech, but opts not to use it. Cookie did go down to LVBD, but at the same time, WMA found Nutella in the backline. Crispy finds LVBD, and Moxie, how do you break through this choke considering, you know, we know Farah comps for being really good on defense, but coming through an area with such a tight angle, I don't know how you do it with this Farah.
Yeah, especially because like that Pharah, again, is going to be very telegraphed where you come from. You can already see Doge with that shield, just making sure to keep it held up like an umbrella in window, knowing full well that's an angle that LVB can take. If he does have a pulse bomb, could maybe use that to create a little bit of space. KSA just pushing the payload a little bit further. As EXO, I don't see Doge. Where's Doge? There's Doge.
Wait, what's he doing there? Wait, no team to... What the heck is... This guy's crazy. The hack comes through. They were trying to build that EMP, but Doge maybe didn't get the memo, or maybe he did and just didn't want to follow through.
I think he was looking for a pin. I think he was looking for a pin from that high ground as the payload moves around the corner. And you know what? I'm not even peeved about it. We've seen them get away with so much and create so much space because of it. But now they will have that EMP to try to cancel out the impact of this Pharmacy's play. And Catwalk to try and find the angle. There's the EMP. It connects onto the Pharah and forces them back before the barrage can come through. Mayman with the focus finds the Mercy, and as a result, Twisted Minds, even if only one goes onto the EMP, still can't hold this position.
No, they're going to have to keep backing up now. They did find Crispy, however, on the backside. Level 1 Cook has that Baptiste window, which he uses against the barrage, but Yubi's the one to find Level 1 Cook. The window, a little bit in a aggressive position, so they can't utilize it. So Twisted Minds capitalize, and they're going to capture out on this second point. And, you know, Moxie, I can't help but think there's a little bit of trolling happening for Oblivion because now Twisted Minds, they have a solid time bank in third phase. Yeah,
Twisted Minds able to come in with that really good defense matrix from KSA to be able to just umbrella LBBD through that barrage, because the Amp Matrix would have allowed the Fire Strike to kill the Pharah mid-barrage, but the defense matrix is able to gobble it up. EXO now with the swap doges off the Reinhardt onto the Junker Fiend, so you are going to have a little bit more pressure towards things like the Pharah as well as that Diva when it comes to the close quarters fight, something else that Yubi is going to have to watch out for as well. The Slayer's just pressuring out, punishing the fact that EXO don't really have a shield, so the Ana can bump in a lot more damage and build up that nano to give LBBD the boost to be able to burst this high ground immediately open. There's the nano, there's the kills, there's the space created, and even though the hack comes through, it doesn't stop your ability to aim. LBBD on the Pharah shows exactly why this composition can work at its prime.
I don't like this from Oblivione, just simply because of the fact that now coming into 2 minutes and 4 seconds left on this point, they don't really have many people who could touch. Level 1 Cook trying to touch. Here comes WMaimon in a wrecking ball to land, but now the barrage from LBBD. Cookie does find him on the Widow, but is traded out. Pulse Bomb comes out, immediately gets taken, takes out the lamp rather. Now Yubi tries to find the track onto the remaining members of Oblivione. On this point, the rest through came through 1 minute and 44 seconds, but Moxie, I don't know if I like this from Oblivione, because yes, you know, Twisted Minds do play that Farah composition, but you know, you're kind of leading into playing how Twisted Minds wants you to play, right? They want you to feel uncomfortable when they put LBD on Farah, and they want you to change things up when you don't really need to.
Yeah, I think maybe it was a little bit of hubris stuffing up of the Reinhardt on the junction. Like, you're looking for that sustainability, you know that you're heading into point C, so Farah is going to have a little bit harder over time because of that ceiling coming into play. You can set yourself up onto that high ground and punish the fact that Twisted Minds are having to use like nano boosts to allow that Farah to actually be able to hit that ground where she is able to have a lot of impact, so you win the fight before it starts, essentially. But at the same time, the Reinhardt composition was just working so well because what Twisted Minds was doing was pressuring EXO into being uncomfortable in their positioning. That's exactly what the Reinhardt comp was doing against Twisted Minds, right? Slay wasn't really able to find those aggressive angles and hold himself steady in that backline, putting even more pressure onto EXO because there was a Reinhardt constantly moving forward and menacingly walking towards him with either a pin or a fire strike.
Yeah, and on top of that, I guess when you have the likes of WM swapping over Sombra as well, that feels, a little bit awkward considering the May can always be in that fight, but the Sombra, once translocates out, you're just going to not be in the fight. You're going to be down 4 versus 5, but Twisted Minds, Moxie, they're going to run that same composition. They have KSA onto the Diva, except Oblivione, they're going to run back towards that Cass May composition.
Yeah, holding on point A, 1 minute and 30 seconds now for Twisted Minds to try and find an opening. They're going to have to pick up point A. With the time bank that EXO have, we really can't sugarcoat it. If they don't pick up point A and at least make it through point B, or halfway through, not going to be able to take King's Row. Twisted Minds looking for that opening, have already been able to find themselves high ground, and that means that the pressure from EXO's hit scan is off of that Pharah.
Yeah, perfect lamp though, but LBB is just so free. Nobody's even looking at him on the inside. Cookie does trade back Nutella, but these engagements from Twisted Minds are just too clean. And first point King's Row, right? This is probably why Twisted Minds took this map, is simply because Pharah is so strong on first point King's Row.
Yeah, especially because you can really use just that building hotel to be able to block a lot of line of sight from the hit scan if they're not holding super aggressively around statue. And KSA just goes in, takes the bulk of attention, forces EXO into walking into hotel, and that means that they're all clumped up for those power rockets to be able to connect onto almost every single one of them. Lamp comes out, but it only buys you a little bit of time that should have been spent turning to deal with the Pharah, but again, doesn't go towards the Pharah, continues to stay on that Diva. And as a result, LBBD comes in with the kills and potentially the snowball ultimate to be able to keep this payload pushing through. Play, by the way, is posted up on that high ground. He's crouching, trying to hide, has the nano boost, but doesn't want to use it yet to give away his position, because they want to use it for the Pharah to come in with that barrage.
Putting the damage output, there it is, onto WMA, and Cookie as well. Finds Globalhood Crook in the air with the Sky after the jump from the Baptiste to find that kill. 3 for them. Overtime ticks down now, and it's a little bit worrisome for Oblivione, right? This is what Twisted Minds composition, when you have LBBD on the roster, is, you take the good with the bad, right? You have to play around LBBD's Pharah, but the positive is you have to play around LBBD's Pharah, right? I mean, he's one of the best Pharahs in the entire game, and he's really proving it right now.
Well, EXO, however, do have one major positive that's going to help them super massively in this next fight, and that's the overtime bar is on their side. Doge is about to come in with a shatter. Maymon's about to hear the blizzard. Slay's going to potentially look for a sleep to try and cancel out any impact of the Reinhardt. Yanti does manage to connect on to 2, forces out that lamp. That allows him to potentially come through, but it doesn't find the kill until now. The shadow was there from Doge. Maymon's was able to follow up with the blizzard, and Twisted Minds just have to keep throwing themselves on the payload, but the res is cancelled from Nutella, and that's going to make it so much harder to keep themselves in this fight for long enough.
UBs. No. Nutella, resurrect, potentially. Now just Slay gets to sleep in the 1 versus 2 on the point. Just has to play his life. He gets the heals back, gets the grenade. Oh, no, but he gets stuck by Cookie. The skillful move from him to just throw the auto-aim grenade sticky onto Slay to stop that push. That could have been scary for Oblivione, but actually it might even end up being scary considering, they got a lot farther than maybe you would have wanted. Yeah,
with the time bank that Twisted Minds had going into that, especially given how dominant EXO were looking at the beginning of King's Row against the Pharah comp, Twisted Minds are very happy that they were able to get it that far, because not only do they get the opportunity to hold and eat into the time bank on point A, they also get at least 2 fights in Streets phase. Most importantly, they get to potentially fight at choke if they're able to reposition when they lose point A in time for a full regroup.
Twisted Minds now, they have to hold for 4 minutes and 4 seconds against Oblivione, and once they get past this first point, it's going to be scary for Twisted Minds. Actually, pretty much everywhere on this entire map, just considering on defense, you're not really going to be able to play around this point. The only person that could touch his KSA is going to have to keep coming in and out and keep touching the point as Oblivione rotate around. Now on Oblivione's side, Moxie, do you think they could rock a composition that trying to counters LBBD, or do you think they stick towards that May Reinhardt composition?
I mean, I would say stick towards the May Reinhardt, because at the end of the day, if they just push and walk onto that point with the May and the Reinhardt, Twisted Minds have to walk into them to actually be able to contest, otherwise the point just flips to EXO for absolute free. They are going to start off with the Widowmaker. They know that the Pharah is going to be around the Hanzo, just there for the Sonic to provide a little bit of assistance for Mayman to line up the shots before the swap comes through. And it's going to be that Ryan May Cassidy composition coming on out. UV already forced to use that recall from pressure coming out from Crispy, and that's one massive angle onto this Pharah, and a lot of burst damage denied from LBBD. EXO have already been able to make it onto the corner of the point, and it's only the Divas who can really contest this.
Yeah, Doge touches now. LBD actually goes for the aggressive push, but Cookie is the one to find that after an early lamp from level 1 Crook. Nice in-game adjustments from him to change and use that lamp earlier as soon as LBD engages to make sure they don't lose their cast early. And now it's just KSA to touch with that Mercy pocket and a pocket over the top side, but they may boost up top to try to get the engagement, but they get anti-grenaded, so Oblivion has to drop towards this point. As LBBD, he'll be back in this fight. It's going to be even 5 versus 5 recontest. Level 1 Crook does have that engagement now he has to worry about from Yubi, and Yubi's the one to find level 1 Mamo, or W Mamon on the backside, and you still have LBD over the top side of statue spamming. Now Cookie gets caught out. Doge falls back to the choke point. They have to reset yet again. They have a lot of time in the bank and got 2 ticks, but it's still a little bit worrisome versus Twisted Minds, who have ultimates this next fight.
Yeah, it's eating into that time bank as well. This is great for Twisted Minds, because they're going to be able to come in with a nano boost to put into LBBD, but the pin from Doge connects onto KSA. Already a chunk of the Diva mech taken out of the mix, and as a result, the boosters have to use to get to the high ground. There's the nano boosted Farah, is able to take out the backline of EXO, deals with the lamp, then deals with the players who resided inside it, and this is EXO going back to the drawing board. However, the fight is done extremely quickly, and EXO, most importantly, hold on to ultimates all the way through it. Twisted Minds are the only ones who spend in that fight. EXO can just bank up ultimates and try and brute force their way through.
Yeah, maybe Twisted Minds opt to go for a bit more of a cheesy play through this hotel side, but Oblivione, let's see if they catch it out. I think they see the Mercy wings in that hotel. Now LB comes into the barrage. Are they aware the defensive matrix is enough to keep him alive? Even though a May Ultimate and Baptiste were committed for Oblivione, it might not be enough to get some kills here. Level 1 Crook now on the 1v1 with LBD, has the Mercy pocket, so LBD's the one to come out on top, but now it's just a Lucio and a Reinhardt, and they can't really do much here. Even though they found 1 kill, it wasn't enough to deal with Oblivione set play.
Yeah, Twisted Minds did not get spotted out in hotel, and LBBD uses the concussive to make his way straight into the middle of EXO's composition. KSA boosts in with the defense matrix, and the barrage picks up all of the backline players, pressuring Cookie out and allowing Twisted Minds to walk straight through the amp matrix that level 1 Crook had set up. But Shatter is going to be in play from Doji, connects onto KSA, the only ultimate really that EXO had to worry about in this fight, forcing out that self-destruct, and they're even able to pick up the baby Diva before she can get back into mech. It's going to take a little bit longer than it was on their first round, but EXO have been able to break open point A.
Yeah, Doge actually putting his team on his back. Now that delay comes through, they know that Nutella isn't close to that Valkyrie, although he could build it here in this next fight. He's getting staggered. I wonder how long they're going to stagger him for, actually. It's kind of like a Baby Diva situation because this Mercy can't run, then goes to the payload to stop it. They did wall him off to make sure he couldn't get through. But that time that he's going to spend dead, I mean, it's probably going to enter one last fight territory here. Yeah,
not only did he get the stagger onto the Mercy, but it also significantly clips LBBD's aggression. Right? It means that Twisted Minds don't get to play around that choke and use the Farah to pummel EXO with just poke damage before they're even able to get a line of sight onto her. Instead, they take the fight in streets, and that Farah is going to be a lot more vulnerable unless she tries to use those rooftops to hide her position, as you can actually see LBBD doing right now. Really going to come down to how impactful this barrage is in the next fight. There's the nano boost, there's the concussive in, but the barrage is only available now.
There's the nano barrage play, Mamon and Cookie down, so is level 1 Crook. No time left either, and Twisted Minds are going 1-1 in this series on King's Row. We questioned the choice, we didn't know how it was going to go. After the first point, we thought EXO was in the lead, but somehow, someway, LBBD swap into Farah always manages to put on the show. And LBBD obviously getting to play the game. The nano boost plays, the honestly time to commit onto those lamps, the adjustments, not panicking, just perfectly placed rockets, precision. You know, if Yasan's a bit more of a crazier player, LBBD is the slow and methodical Farah, and honestly put on quite the performance on King's Row to tie up the series 1-1.
It's still the same strategy though. Both Yazan and LBBD do wait a lot of the time until they go aggressive for that nano boost to come online. It sort of harkens back to old school dives, right, where Winston's would just face tank a lot of damage that their Anis would build up to the nano boost before the actual dive came through. And in this meta, you really do need that nano boost for that power to get to go aggressive, because not only when you use that ultimate you have to worry about being able to take the lamp out in time, you also have to worry about things like capacity, just turning around to two tapping tools, the Mercy really not going to be able to save you in time for just the sheer amount of 140 headshots back to back. But you can see from Twisted Minds, they invest a lot more resources. They go and play into the Pharah composition. They see that it's working, that it's pressuring Doge on that Reinhardt out a lot more than we were seeing when LBBD was trying to run that Sojourn. And as a result, even KSA swapping onto that D.Va, being able to use Defense Matrix to better make sure that those barrages are survivable for the Pharah, goes so far in securing Twisted Minds that space to be able to reach.
Yeah, and I think that can't be understated, honestly. The fact that KSA swaps that D.Va, finds the chance to actually change it up and allow LBD that positioning that he had before, or that didn't have before rather, and to keep mixing it up instead of just playing the same old, you know, Ramattra into Junker Queen, to actually make those changes on the fly. I mean, that cannot be understated how good KSA has been playing. But guys, we'll be going to a short break. When we come back, we'll go to map number 3, and you're not going to miss it. This has been a banger of a series yet again. Day number 2 over here in the Pro-Am qualifiers. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Pro-Am West qualifiers. Not Pro-Am, right Mox? I don't want to mess it up again, but obviously coming back into this map number 3, we've had an exciting series so far. I mean, map number 1 obviously going in favor of Oblivione to win 2-0 on Antarctic Peninsula, then to come in onto King's Row, have a strong start, and then Twisted Minds to come back in that series to actually make that fair composition work out and stop EXO's push and stop their actual advantage they had previously. Who do you think has the favor leading into Junkertown, Moxie?
I mean, there's a reason, obviously, that EXO want to take us to Junkertown, so obviously you would say, yeah, it's probably going to be EXO because it's their map pick. But it sort of really does go back to what we were saying at the beginning of this broadcast, right, where we were talking about meta hasn't really been cemented yet for a lot of these teams, so it's very important that you don't really try and mirror into compositions, that you play what you feel most comfortable in. And I think nowhere is that better seen than when we went to King's Row and we saw the difference of what a Pharah and a D.Va can do for a team that is very used to being able to rally around a Pharah and a D.Va. And that's the reason that it is going to be a Junkertown push, right? The Pharah does become a lot harder to be able to pull off on Junkertown, where there's a lot less space and buildings for her to be able to block away from line of sight from.
That's a good point. I think that's perfect for Oblivione, and obviously to swap Pistola in, like you mentioned, Sigma will be probably the primary factor for Oblivione. Now, on the opposite side, yesterday we did see success for SR Peak Check with Cloudy, just to keep playing that Reinhardt with that Mei and just continually rush at that Sigma. It did work out for them. However, this team is quite different, right? Oblivion, like we mentioned, completely different team than it was previously. Now to come in obviously shows weakness to that Pharah composition, and it's a completely different roster. Isn't that funny, Moxie? It's a completely different roster in its entirety, and yet somehow, some way, EXO kind of falters against some of these Pharah comps.
Yeah, the thing is, like, Pharah comp is always a really weird one because, like, you know what it's going to be, but at the same time, it becomes a lot harder to really be able to counter because you're like, okay, well, we want to have the long angles, we want to have the high ground so we can try and contest it as quickly as possible, but you also have to remember that the approach to dealing with Pharmacy has always been to try and target that Mercy first. And as a result, with the Mercy changes coming through and the fact that the Mercy gets a little bit more tankiness in terms of being able to heal targets when they're critical health, it becomes even more important for the Mercy to go down first. And one thing I want to point out, this is how good these Mercies who are used to being playing with Pharahs are, is that a lot of the time when we saw LBPD go down, it was actually before Nutella. And Nutella, like Ange, has had the years of experience being on teams always pocketing Pharahs to be able to play that Mercy positioning perfectly. So if that Pharah continues to take damage and you don't manage to land those 2 shots consecutively, the Mercy getting that little extra boost on targets that are critical health is just going to keep that Pharah absolutely unstoppable in the sky.
Right, and I like how you mentioned the Mercy. I mean, it's everybody in the rosters. I know we highlight the Pharah for sure because it is the primary factor of this composition, but, on the opposite side, it is what everybody else is doing. It is, that Mercy pocket. It is Yubi on Tracer being able to do as much as he's been able to do, running around the map, putting pressure on that back line, constantly throwing pulse bombs out to make sure that lamp hits, because if they don't put pressure on level 1 Crook, then really at the end of the day, LBD's not going to get as much value as he was down range. And also, on top of that, for Twisted Minds, it's smart as a team to not falter as other Pharah teams would and maybe swap towards the Echo when it's not working out, maybe swap towards some of those other different compositions when realistically that Pharah comp is always going to work. And it's so interesting to see the evolution of Pharah kind of be like, okay, Pharah is super dominant, then people learn how to aim, in the history of Overwatch, and then at the same time, now Pharah players are getting so good that they can play Pharah against compositions that you would think would absolutely counter the Pharah.
Yeah, it does, however, burn through a lot of your resources because you are putting so much on the Pharah comp. So it's very much like that sort of Zenyatta comp in some ways. It is a glass cannon. I sort of look at it as a wizard in D&D, where you can be exceptionally strong if you're able to hit level 20, but until you hit that level 20 and you do have that nano boost in Mercy Pocket, you are just as fragile as a sheet of paper. And that is exactly what EXO are going to be looking to take advantage of, because when you look at how you're able to position on King's Row as the Pharah as opposed to on Junkertown, the big difference is the scenery. Most importantly, point A. There are no rooftops to really be able to hide around that really impose into that skyline. The rooftops on Junkertown are pretty accessible for a lot of players, including something like the Sojourn. If you're running something like a Widowmaker, you can grapple onto them, obviously, and you can just keep yourself there, as opposed to King's Row, where you're constantly sliding off of them. Yeah,
it should be a good map for EXO. And let me pose you a question here, Moxie, since you mentioned how Pharah's kind of like Wizard, from D&D. Then what would be the Peasant class? Have you heard about the Peasant class before?
What?
You've never heard of the Peasant class? So there's a class...
I've never heard of the Peasant class.
There's a class that can literally just infinitely spawn chickens. and there's like a meme build that you could do where you just like infinitely spawn chickens and you can use them to kill people. The class itself is terrible. It's mid across the board.
I'm having flashbacks to Legend of Zelda where you accidentally hit the chicken and then you just get absolutely bombarded by an absolute swarm of piranha-like chickens. Oh man, the nostalgia, that just sent me spiraling back a good 10 years.
Well, which class in Overwatch is kind of like in that situation where it's not very good? You know, what hero,
Moira.
I should say? Moira?
Moira.
Yeah, Moira's in a bit of a rough spot, but
I would say Moira. But you know what else is spiraling me back into nostalgia? It's Junkertown and its Widowmaker.
Ooh.
Oh, inaugural Overwatch League season, eat your heart out. Cookie is coming out on that Widowmaker, and we're going to have a Widow duel. Quartz against Cookie. Already, Quartz able to find that first opening shot onto Cookie. Not a kill shot, however, as he looks for that next grapple. Does not manage to find a second connection onto the defensive Widowmaker, and as a result, doesn't really get to go as aggressive in positioning as he wants.
And LBBD on BAP, by the way. We can't understate how this guy's just transitioned to Baptiste. Yazan swapping to Cassidy, LBBD swapping to Baptiste. We have quite the variation in terms of these Pharah players' hero pools as they've changed as of late. But Quartz, you know, on that backside, by the way, is SZA. Looking for that Widowmaker on that back line, trying to find some sort of squishy, but it's just Pistola that is seen. And WMamo's the one to find that early pick onto LBBD on the back line. Now UB already on to Cookie. The Lamp committed to actually keep him alive, even though he had the Zenyatta orb. WMamon has been putting in tons of damage on that front line, and that's going to be a stop already for EXO.
Careful.
Yeah, here's the reason why we actually saw the Lamp being invested to save the Widowmaker, and that's because of the pressure that you're putting onto Twisted Minds. Especially where that fight takes place, a lot of open space in between Twisted Minds and walking into EXO, and that means a lot of damage potential for the Widowmaker. Like, Cookie just staying alive in Twisted Minds, knowing that there's a Widowmaker around, especially because we're seeing the swap off of the Widowmaker and onto the Sojourn, losing that one-tap potential. Twisted Minds have to be so much more careful in terms of how they peek this first corner.
Yeah, there's a Tracer 1v1 happening in the back line. Meanwhile, Cookie's the one to find Quartz on that front line. Same with level 1 Crook. And yet again, they should go on the advantage. Level 1 Crook to go for the 1v1 Eagle duel with Slay after Slay did take down WMamon. But at the same time, EXO and the rest of the roster is still safe, besides the fact that they did have UB in their back line. UB backs out of there. And it looks like EXO's still in a pretty solid spot. 2 minutes left now for TM on the first point.
Yeah, level 1 Crook as well, holding on to this Transcendence for the next fight. This, by the way, is why you want to make sure that you keep the Widowmaker on defense occupied. If you peek out too early, you are going to get headshots. Speaking about headshots, Ant Matrix is going to come through, but no headshots currently there, so Signal Flux does come through to deny the massive impact of it. Doesn't manage to deny the Pulse Bomb, though. Maimon pulls out the Lamp going on to that Baptiste. LBBD saved for a couple of seconds, but once the Lamp is gone, so too is the BAP, and Twisted Minds are left right back into spawn.
Expert communication, though, from EXO as well. If you notice, level 1 Crook used that Transcendence. Crispy saved onto that Lamp, onto that Immortality field. Sometimes, you know, you don't know who's going to use what first, and that's just good backline communication from EXO.
Yeah. Quartz is going to be getting pretty close to that overclock, but EXO do have the room to be able to really hide themselves away from it. UB could be the difference maker. He's still looking for that flank angle to try and push on to EXO. Knows that there isn't going to be a Transcendence to save the Zen, but it's Crispy that he's going after, trying to burn out that Lamp as fast as possible.
Ooh. And UB found level 1 Quick, though, knowing where he was, scouted him out, acted like he was going to dive onto that Baptiste, forcing that Baptiste shift out, the self-heal out. But now at the same time, KSA finds Cookie, and that's already 2 dead. The overclock still being held here for Quartz on that backside, looking for the Tracer. Doesn't know where he is. Now they've scouted out where Maimon is. Maimon runs back towards the health pack, just trying to play his life. The recontest comes through. Vistola goes towards that point, has the Lamp if they need it. Vistola's still super low. He's going to fall, or Crispy's the one to fall actually to the overclock onto the backside of Quartz. Quartz finds onto level 1 Crook as well. And that's the first point for Twisted Minds. They don't have that bad of a time bank, 2 minutes and 47 seconds in the second phase.
Yeah, really good adaptation as well from UB to use that Pulse Bomb, throwing it onto the ground to avoid it being eaten up by Vestola's shift. Does mean that EXO once again find that Sigma being pressured so far that Maimon doesn't actually get the opportunity to use the Pulse Bomb that he'd been able to build up in and potentially disrupt Twisted Mind's back line, allowing EXO to be able to hold their position a little bit longer. However, that does mean the Pulse Bomb is still going to be available for this next fight. Maimon already using those flinks, pushing onto that backline, pushing Quartz out of line of sight, and now he's found that Baptiste. No lamp going to be forced from LBBD just yet. And Quartz is actually able to peel. Maimon goes down to the ult fire with the pulse bomb still intact.
Yeah, EXO still hanging above this high ground. Down one member now. Level 1 Cook gets hit by a rock, drops to the low ground. The lamp not there to save him. Now Yubi is there with the follow-up on the low ground. Now it's just Pistola over the top side. No Zenyatta Discord. Quartz finds Crispy, his backline, even though he committed that Baptiste window. And now EXO, they're in a rough spot. Twisted Minds, they're snowballing on to third point.
Yeah, especially because when you actually look at where those fights were taking place, a lot of fragmented fights are not really on the actual objective. So all through every single engagement, Twisted Minds are just slowly pushing that payload even further. And as a result, the time bank which had disappeared after that point A push taking so long is now renewed entirely. They were able to push all the way through B without slowing down at any point, and they have over 3 minutes to be able to try and push into point C. Yes, they're getting pretty close to that. Sigma Flux is going to have it online before level 1 Crook hits that Transcendence, and that's going to bait out that lamp, allowing Maimon to come in with a pulse bomb that could actually find a pick.
Pulse bomb comes out from WMAMO, but it's a little bit of a whiff. Sigma ultimate, the flux comes through, doesn't actually hit on anybody, so perfect movement and mobility from Twisted Minds as they come up onto all ultimates. Level 1 Crook, Transcendence, and Cookie's Overclock coming up over to the top side. Twisted Minds try to rotate inside the building. They still got this car pushing forward. 2 minutes, 15 seconds left over to the top. The right clicks come through, but incoming Sigma Flux from KSA forces the Transcendence from Level 1 Crook as Cookie already falls the Quartz onto that backside. Didn't have to use the Overclock. Now Quartz commits it. Pulse bomb lands onto absolutely nobody, but here comes that Baptiste window with the Overclock over the top side. Quartz knows there's a Zenyatta on the top, hits that body shot. Yubi with the follow through. Vestola goes down to his own primary fire into that shield of KSA. Twisted Minds push through with that Transcendence. Slay runs post Transcendence at WMA's face to take him out, and Twisted Minds now cap out on Junkertown with 1 minute and 42 seconds.
Twisted Minds, by controlling that high ground for Quartz, getting that amp matrix, even though he doesn't really find the kills through it, he still sidelines the entire backline of EXO. No Zenyatta, no Baptiste that they have to worry about, and remember, Zen's orbs rely on line of sight. If you're out of line of sight, that Discord is going to fall off, so too is the healing for the team. And by cutting off the sustainability, they can just look for the frontline brawl, knowing that their BAP is going to be able to keep them sustained all the way through. Even if they do lose players, they're still going to be able to bulk through the majority of the fight before a regroup can be corralled from EXO's side.
Yeah, and this entire tournament, just to reflect upon it, I mean, this is an entire gauntlet all of these teams will have to go through just to have the chance to play against some Overwatch League teams. I mean, it's the perfect situation, right? I mean, we're in such a unique spot where a lot of these teams are fresh and new. A lot of them are just combining, right? EXO being a totally new team, Twisted Minds taking some bits and pieces from other teams. And at the end of the day, you're trying to prove to these Overwatch League teams, you know, you're better than them, right? You may have the Overwatch League spot. You may be, you may have millions of dollars of backing. But at the end of the day, if we beat you in the Pro-Am, what does that say about you? And what does it say about us? You know, I'd be scared if I was, you know, the Vegas Eternal right about now to play against either EXO or Twisted Minds, right?
Well, future matches on the horizon, maybe. What we can look at is the match that we're currently in, because once again, it is going to be that Widowmaker showdown coming on through. Cookie taking up that mantle off the hit scan, waiting to see whether or not it's going to be Quartz to make that aggressive play and look for the first grapple, as Maimon decides to take advantage of a lack of Widowmaker and starts to engage that opposite to make sure that the Tracer doesn't get to bully the Widow and keep their attention occupied.
Yeah, they're still making sure that Yubi not in a good position. They're actually rotating around that backside to set up Cookie now for this outside angle. It's usually what Widowmakers go for. Cookie actually goes for the grapple shot, but unfortunately for him, can't get the charge up now. Incoming Quartz goes for the grapple of his own, but misses the shot now. WMAMO on that backside flank gets the Zenyatta or perfectly placed from Slay onto Quartz, and now Vistola on that front line has a ton of pressure on him. Has to get out of there. Forced to use the lamp. Lamp goes down. Yubi finds Cookie over to the backside because so much was committed to the front line, but that allows Maimon to find Quartz, but Yubi trades it back to level 1 Crook. Pulse bomb comes out. No more Discord onto Vistola, but KSA finds Crispy on the inside, so EXO backs up out of there, and Twisted Minds have had a great first point. Cookie does find Slay, but they're still in a pretty good position.
Yeah, Yubi had an absolute storm cover fight in that last engagement. Is able to keep the Sigma invested, so he's not able to peel back for the backline, as well as Twisted Minds now still in that defense, going to be coming up with an amplification matrix in this next fight. Crispy's going to have one of his own too. We wait to see one of these Widowmakers find that opening pick. There's the Pulse Bomb, but the lamp is there. LBBD sustains through the ultimate as Cookie looks to try and find their mirror and allow this fight to open up a little bit more space for EXO to work with.
And Bastola could not actually find the follow-through. And as well, look at the pack line. Yubi in the 1v1. Yubi does go down. Slay does give it still on the front line, though. So at what cost was that trade-off? Really wasn't worth it because now, 2 minutes and 6 seconds left. EXO, they're in a similar spot that Twisted Minds wasn't before. So, you know, if they don't win this next fight, they will for sure be in a deficit.
Yeah, they will have a Sigma Flux to try to break open a little bit more space, but Slayer's just holding on to this Transcendence. And Maimon had just used Pulse Bomb. He's not really going to be able to threaten the Zen into using the ultimate too soon. As an Matrix comes through from EXO to open up this fight, Cookie even using Infrasight to make sure the Twisted Minds don't really get to step in front to try and use LBBDs as he looks for the grapple shot, but he's just not able to find the hit.
No, the Transcendence Force, both Sigma ultimates are committed. Yubi again finds level 1 Cook on the backside. The lamp was committed a little bit too late. KSA killed Crispy even through that lamp before the Gravitic Flux could finally capitalize. And now, like we mentioned, EXO, they're in an actual deficit now. 1 minute and 20 seconds left. They have maybe 1.5 fights left.
Twisted Minds are doing a very good job of just positioning even around this Widowmaker. Cookie is not getting an opening to be able to find those picks, and as a result, Yubi isn't actually occupied dealing with the Widowmaker. Instead, he's going for the backline and bullying out the Zen, bullying this Baptiste into using that lamp too early, and that's when Twisted Minds can really bite in to this attack. Level 1 Crook will have the Transcendence, but Quartz does have the Infrasight and Cookie doesn't. This is 16 seconds that EXO just have to hide for, and Yubi knows exactly where to go to stack into that Pulse Bomb, triggering that Transcendence before overtime can hit.
And Immortality Field. I mean, that's terrible. Now the body shot comes through on a Crispy. Everybody's low. Yubi really has been an X factor, but Slay, again, finds level 1 Crook. First level 1 Crook has to deal with this Tracer, then Slay comes through with the right click through this Mega Health Pack side. I mean, this is a rough spot for EXO.
Yeah, Twisted Minds might be able to pull off this full hold. It's all going to come down to Maimon. One Pulse Bomb to try and open this fight up. This Tracer has to navigate so many dangers. Not just the lamp to actually make sure you find a pick, but you have to get past the Widowmaker that's going to be posted up, and Cookie goes down early. There's no way that you can wait for the regroup. You have to just throw yourself onto the card, and it's going to come down to Maimon since they're not running that Lucio or a Diva. And this means that it's an entirely uncontested Widow. Quartz is free firing right now.
Hey, yo, I want to cap 3.25 that, but Malone goes for the Pulse Bomb, lands onto that lamp. On the front line, you can't really pressure towards that point. Quartz still pumping in that damage onto the back line, looking for a Tracer now. Finds some of those shots, the pre-fire angles, but the Tracer can't really do much more. Level 1 Cook does find Yubi, who has been a menace the entire time, but LBBD with the follow-through, showing he's not just a Pharaoh one trick, also could play Baptiste. Twisted Minds will win on Junkertown to take this series, or to be up in the series 2-1.
I wonder how much of this was the surprise element coming through, because none of us, ourselves, and I'm sure EXO included, were expecting LBBD to swap over and flex off of a Pharaoh and onto a Baptiste. Projectile off onto hit scan doesn't really happen that often, but more importantly, DPS onto support doesn't really happen that often, but it allowed Twisted Minds to really be able to turn Junkertown, a map that should have been against them off of the composition that they've traditionally run, entirely around.
Yeah, this is not a good look for support players across the world if LBBD can just come in and swap the Baptiste like that, if it's just that easy for him. But honestly, Slay played phenomenal. I mean, so did the rest of Twisted Minds. Yubi had a phenomenal map. I would definitely say MVP of that map, to just consistently get those flanks off, to just pressure level 1 Crook so he was never in a comfortable position. And overall, the team of Twisted Minds, some of these one clips from Yubi were phenomenal. And honestly, Twisted Minds on that point really played well. Quartz also subbing in. We have to bear in mind, was probably a little bit nervous coming in, considering it was his first map after map number 1. You know, maybe could be not warm, could be a little bit cold coming into it, but really proved his Widowmaker was, it was nothing Cookie could match, honestly.
I mean, yeah, Yubi, honestly, we can't understate this, like, 100% MVP. He was absolutely monstrous on that Tracer, making sure that the backline was always turning around to deal with him. The fact as well that, like, the BAP had to deal with the Tracer and try and peel for the Zen because he didn't really have anyone else who could do it. again just has this domino effect into eating into the resources. If the backline's turning around to deal with a Tracer, your front line is going to be a lot more vulnerable. And heading into Colosseo, it feels like EXO are going to try and take us back to the very beginning of this series, where we saw that Rhine rush coming out from them, and they were able to find so much value because of just being able to use the threat of the Reinhardt in that frontline fight to keep all of the pieces of their opponents away. And looking at the chat and seeing that Doge does appear to be subbing in for Vestola, I feel like EXO are doing just that.
Okay, so we got Vestola being subbed out for Doge, like you mentioned, and we have Twisted Minds, I imagine, subbing out Quartz. So I guess probably not. Maybe they sub out LBD. They put Nutella in, I guess. So maybe depending on what they plan to run, they don't maybe want to run that Pharah composition. I guess on push, things can vary, and especially on a map like Colosseo, you don't have a lot of that verticality that you have on some of these other maps, and the map is so new that I guess it's not that new. Overwatch 2 has been out for a bit now, but at the same time, it's not a lot of verticality that you could play around on that Pharah, right? Considering that Sojourn's so good, you have Cookie on the opposite side that you can't really take. You have to take into consideration, considering he can always be terrifying. What do you think Twisted Minds do to capitalize to make this series a 3-1 victory over EXO, Moxie?
I think you keep running this Tracer and Sojourn. Like, honestly, I don't think you really want to sub in that Pharah just because, like you said, there's a lot more chances for that Pharah to get picked out. You can put more pressure on the backline, but we're already seeing that Yubi is already doing just that. He's putting so much pressure on the backline. And given the fact that Cookie and Mainwin are most likely going to be running the Tracer and Sojourn themselves, you don't want to run a Pharah, you want to be able to run a counter Sojourn. So that those angles that these Sojourn players are looking for, when we see that first fight on Colosseo run into sometimes 2 minutes or longer, it's just because both of those teams are waiting for that Sojourn player to find a railgun shot, find that first pick, swing the numbers advantage in their favor, and that's when the brawl happens. You don't really get that potential when you're running the Pharah, just because all of the angle shutdown that the Sojourn can output when you know her position, but you don't want to walk into that line of sight and be that first player that goes down.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because just for Sojourn, at least, you can build up that momentum through, getting that primary fire off, and then hit, maybe you're not hitting your alt fire originally, hitting some of those railguns, instead just going for those, regular pull shots. But then, going back into the previous map for Cookie to look back into history, obviously they want to wipe that map out of their mind. They want to move forward into this next map on Colosseo. But at the same time, for Cookie, maybe he'll have a little bit more time to build up that momentum, playing on a more comfortable role, whereas Quartz got subbed in and kind of, yes, at the same time, Cookie had to deal with Yubi on Tracer, but at the same time, Quartz still played very well on the Widowmaker, and Cookie, maybe more sticking towards a comfortability pick on this Sojourn could enable him on this next map.
Yeah, I think this is the true test for Twisted Minds, right? This is whether or not you can adapt in and around this Rhine Rush without relying on the Pharah and Diva to be able to break it open. Because they are keeping Quartz and Yubi in, so it is going to be that Tracer, it is going to be that Sojourn, but KSA is still going to be the tank. So you get a lot less value if you're running the Diva alongside it than if you're running the Diva to better prop up that Pharah pick. And this is where we saw Twisted Minds really start to stumble. In that first map on Antarctic, when EXO are running the Rhine Rush, and they don't have the verticality to be able to punish the Rhine's lack of it.
I mean, Junker Queen is not terrible, right? I mean, she did get those changes where she, the cooldown timer of Carnage does, decrease the more people you hit with it. But at the same time, you don't have the armor that Reinhardt has, and it is going to be a little bit of a hole that Twisted Minds already probably going to have to dig themselves out of immediately with this composition. But they have the Ashe, they have that damage into the backline, as Cookie on the cast on the opposite side is also going to be a little bit of a difference in terms of compositions.
So the Ashe pick is actually really interesting, because EXO aren't running the Kiriko. So you're not going to have a way of cleansing the Dynamite, which does put a lot more pressure onto Doge to keeping the shield up for as long as possible to block just that from connecting as the Dynamite comes through, and KSA is walled away from his team. Lamp will be able to keep him up. No one's gone down, but EXO have already been able to take a sizable chunk of space away from the composition that Twisted Minds want to run into them with.
And Quartz already coming in, putting an impact on the W. Maimon, I mean, they're kind of playing it similar to you would play that Pharah composition, Moxie, right? Disengage, wait out that wall, make sure you get the lamp through, just keep running away the entire time. And as long as you have the Ash pumping the damage, I mean, it should theoretically do more than the cast, right?
Yeah, something else that we haven't really mentioned about rotting this Junker Queen, by the way, is the jagged blades. You can see KSA, whenever EXO looks for that disengagement, the knife comes through to try and yank a play from EXO back in. So even if the Lucio is there, you can still try and find another pick, another stagger, as Cookie lands one in between Slayer's eyes, and Doge comes in with the absolute bonkers charges to land once again into the back line. Get the GPS trackers, Dustin. We're going for a walk.
I'm always surprised. I know that it's still so early on, and you know, they did lose King's Row, but every time I swear Doge makes the charge look like it has a longer reach than it actually does. Like somehow
it's like Twisted Minds are stuck in that Zarya bubble, so it does lengthen out. Yeah.
Very unique player, Doge. You know, I didn't think I'd be saying that until today, but on the front line, nice shot, by the way, to open this up. That was mid-air Baptiste jump. That wasn't even like a misplay by Slay. That was just a nice shot from Cookie.
That was just absolutely gorgeous. And our replay of Guri, as we get to see in replay, but what else we're getting to see is absolute ultimate dominance coming out from X. Blizzard into Amp Matrix means that, like you said, absolutely everyone's frozen, but Twisted Minds are still turning it around. Quartz is actually able to land the pop, but Doge finishes it off. The Dynamite takes the Reinhardt away, but it's not enough to kill. And though EXO did start to lose their players, they're still able to get a little bit more distance before Doge has to charge away.
Yeah, Quartz trying to play hero ball. I mean, it was whoever wasn't frozen versus whoever, you know, was frozen, just on both sides. But really nice job from Quartz towards the end until Doge just comes through with the charge. But now KSA, like you mentioned, has that Rampage ready to go on that front line. But incoming Doge in the front line. Rampage goes into the back, but Doge already found the Tella. However, Cookie was hit by that anti from the Rampage of KSA. Now KSA is being chased down. Slay does find his counterparts, and also WMA mode. Doge does get KSA on the opposite side, so no tank. It's just a Lucio and a Reinhardt. So they decide to back up, give some more timing and positioning to Twisted Minds, but you don't want to do this forever because the clock is ticking.
Quartz has been doing so much damage on the Ashe, by the way. Again, with that Dynamite tick and no way of alleviating it from EXO's side, he's already almost at another Bob. So you can just continue to exert a little bit more pressure on this Reinhardt. Twisted Mind's going to back on up to try and avoid the frontline brawl into an Amp Matrix of their team. Maywall comes through to negate the majority of it, but Doge is already in too deep. He's not getting bailed out, and this is going to be the trickle. This is the stagger pick. As without that Reinhardt, EXO just have no way of escaping safely.
Yeah, EXO's adjustments, unfortunately, aren't really working out for them. I mean, they relied heavily on Cookie getting that Hanzo pick. Now Cookie back over to the Cassidy. And that was just really perfectly placed positioning in terms of Twisted Minds with that fight. They seem to be on the same page right now, figuring out the right areas to fight, and it's working out for them with this Bob aggressively going towards the spawn. Doge gets booped up, Lamp committed, but can't save him from the carnage from KSA as Quartz follows through on the level 1 Crook and Crispy. And I like how you mentioned it, Moxie. Quartz has been popping off on this Ashe.
Yeah, really getting to put that Bob into the backline of EXO before they can wrangle a push together as well to feel comfortable to send Doge in on that Reinhardt and create the space for a lot of these players to be able to work off of. Was it not available in time as KSA comes in with the backline? It's into a sound barrier from Twisted Minds to allow them to keep themselves even more aggressively through this Blizzard, as Doge is not the first to go down this time, but he's still going to go down without the supports. Twisted Minds mixing the pacing up yet again and making the first move, punishing the fact that EXO really do want to rely off of this Reinhardt rushing in, create the space of an actual push.
Dang, I'm sorry for judging KSA onto the Junker Queen because, you know, he is one of the best Junker Queens. Jagged Blade on the Cookie as he tried to drop was just too hard to escape from. And now, Oblivion, they do have ultimates, but 100 meters to 18 with 5 minutes left. There's some comeback potential here, but it's going to be, you know, it's going to be pretty hard considering Twisted Minds are setting up already in a favorable position for themselves.
Yeah, KSA has to be careful, though, because you can use the Rampage to alleviate the impact of Matrix and Crook. What you also have to remember is that there's no shield on Twisted Mind's side. It is going to be a free shatter for Doge, and if he uses it to cancel the Rampage, it's curtains for this push from Twisted Minds.
Yeah, they back up. The shatter comes through. KSA gets shattered, like you mentioned, and it did shut out that entire play. Unfortunately, Twisted Mind's just not ready for it, or they just wanted to avoid that shatter. I mean, the ability is just super hard to avoid. Somehow the trade comes through, actually, and Yubi does get level 1 Crook, and same with Cookie, but W-Man did find Yubi, and they still have 3 members here, but still down 2. You're going to have to back up here before Twisted Minds come back.
EXO, however, did use ultimates to be able to secure that one as quickly as possible before the Rampage could come through. And as a result, they are going to be working with a little bit less in this next engagement. Twisted Minds can potentially build up to a Bob to be able to peel away from the impact of Blizzard like we've seen them do before. Question is whether or not Yubi is going to be able to infiltrate that backline, draw out the immortality field to make sure that this Rampage is able to connect onto these players and find the opening for kills.
Yeah, they are now pushing forward. Oblivione have that beat, have the May and the High Noon against Twisted Minds with so many ults. Nice headshot from Quartz onto the Lucio. Incoming May ultimate doesn't land onto anybody, but it does zone out KSA. The pulse bomb comes through, blocked by Doge as well, so perfectly played by him. Goes to help Crispy out. Meanwhile, the Bob comes through in the backline, so it forces that beat drop to come out from Crispy to keep everybody healthy, but at the same time, this robot is still contested, so the entire time while Twisted Minds are resetting, they don't get any position, but nice May wall up to the top side. Doge and Cookie capitalize onto Quartz onto that backline, and Doge wants more. He continues onto Twisted Minds' backline, but it's a little bit out of position. Yubi's just slowing down the payload and gets caught out, but the entire time, Oblivione, they're building that meter. They're getting further.
And look at the amount of pressure that's coming onto KSA so that he's not able to use that Rampage. Doge has denied Rampage for 3 fights in a row now, just off of keeping this Junker Queen separated from his team. And as a result, Twisted Minds have not been able to find a heel turn to turn a fight in their favor. There's the Rampage finally into the immortality field. Carnage going to be knocked away by the Lucio boop. And as a result, Twisted Minds were able to find a couple of kills, but they haven't been able to unseat the Rhine.
Yeah, disgusting Rampage. Crispy goes low, still alive, but no. Shut out by Quartz, and Quartz yet again with that 2K in that fight just is perfectly positioned to deal with Oblivione. They did have ultimates, however, Twisted Minds, they did use the Rampage. Crispy used beat drop earlier. Not a lot of ults committed towards that fight. 2 minutes left. They did work it back into a neutral position for Oblivione. If they win this next fight, they'll be set up like decently. But leading this next fight, this is the one that's really going to matter with this ult bank.
Yeah, and EXO, remember, they started off that fight when they knew Rampage was on the table with a shadow, knowing it was free. They can do exactly that and win this fight before Quartz is able to build up into that Bob and potentially push all of EXO back when they don't have a sound barrier. There it is! The shatter into the Ant Matrix follow-up, and the sound barrier from the Teller comes through too late. 2 members are already down.
Yeah, but at the same, Quartz found Crispy on that backside, so that could be something. But now they're kind of zoned out. They're in a bit of a weird position, waiting for 2 members to respawn. Oblivion opts to avoid them until now. Now they high noon, re-engage them against that Bob. They want to take it out fast before it pumps in a lot of damage. Slay's dead. Doge gets pulse bomb, but it is lamped out. Now Quartz trades it back for W. Mame on the backside. Cookie down to 150 HP, but gets that heals. The Ash Dynamite's doing a lot. Twisted Minds actually fighting in a semi-favorable position. Do get Doge, get Cookie as well in EXO. It took a bit too long to deal with that backline who was sitting there for so long.
Yeah, the fact as well, like, they really wanted to punish the fact that Twisted Minds were separated, but Quartz has a Bob. And as a result, when EXO see the regroup, they have to turn around, exposing their max to that regroup from the front line to deal with the Ashe ultimate, exposing themselves and allowing that Reinhardt to be sidelined a lot more, with the Dynamite just taking the health bar even further away. They're still holding onto the Blizzard, however, and Twisted Minds don't have a sound barrier to sustain through it, as once again, EXO, knowing they have the ultimate advantage, just decide to start the fight immediately. Ultimate in, finish the fight, clean, clinical, get the robot in your contest, and immediately start pushing back.
Yeah, bit of a weird choice to fight there for Twisted Minds, considering, you know, they've had favorable matchups ahead of this choke point, but Quartz going to build towards that Bob. He's always somebody to look out for. Now 63 meters, overtime ticks down, Moxie, and he's always getting 1 kill per round, Quartz is, and now Twisted Minds come in. They're going to have that Rampage, and it was brutal last time.
Yeah, Twisted Minds are going to be able to take another fight before EXO are able to equalize. Rampage is going to be online. Soundbar already used early from Crispy, and the Rampage connects onto 4 members of EXO. It does mean with the soundbar health, they're able to survive the tick, but they're not able to survive the immediate effect that comes after it. Ant Matrix comes through from Crook, but it's just a last-ditch effort as Maimon is not able to do anything but try and block through. It's Twisted Minds, however, with the numbers advantage that are able to keep the fight in their favor and taking that fight. Yes, it was at a disadvantage in terms of the positioning, Dustin, but what it did was it burnt the shatter out from the other side. And the shatter was the biggest threat that they had to worry about in that last fight. That overtime bar where they all have to be touching that bot to keep it contested, and that Shatter's going to connect onto all 5 of them.
And SCA, aka Quartz, coming in and really pumping in a lot of that damage that they needed. Previously, Cookie had some, standout plays. However, I would say that, Quartz kind of took the limelight for Twisted Minds to get subbed in and do as well as he has, not dropping a single map the entire time. WMMO did try to equalize things, however, couldn't really pump in as much damage as that Ashe did on that front line. So Twisted Minds to take that victory over EXO, that set them up well, for later on in the Pro-Am.
Yeah, the Ashe as well is really strong in terms of just putting a lot of pressure in that distance fight, but is also really good at being able to keep and contest things like Lucius that want to go super aggressively active into your backline because of things like the Koshkin and the Dynamite, right? A lot of the time, EXO weren't really able to look for that bully approach that they had in the past where they would go after the backline to chase out those really important resources because of the Ashe already set up in that position. And again, the Dynamite coming through, punishing the lack of Kiriko, the lack of a cleanse ability, just meant that the ultimate, the Bob, was online more fights than not. And that Bob does a massive chunk of damage, especially when you're not running something like an Ana, who can put it to sleep and make sure that you don't have to worry about it for a good 8 seconds, a massive chunk of its uptime.
Yeah, and fantastic job from Twisted Minds in general. But guys, we'll be going to a short break. When we come back, we'll have an interview with somebody from Twisted Minds, so don't go anywhere. And we have 2 more matches as well later. So like I said, short break, come back with an interview. See you guys in just a second.